Hi, we've done quite a lot of what I would call area terrain in the past. What I'd like to do today is some linear terrain, so something that blocks line of sight, might impinge on movement as well. Essentially, we're going to do some walls, modular walls that can cover quite a large area of terrain. I've cut some bases from some waste cardboard. I've done 3 long straight sections. These were going to be 12 inches, 1 foot, but unfortunately the foam board comes in A4 size, and that is just short. Well, it's actually for 11.5 inches. So a slight change of plan. I've cut these to the same length as the sheets of foam board. So that should work out all right. So anyway, I've got 3 just under 12-inch pieces. They're 3 inches wide. I've done 2 half-size pieces and a corner piece. And I'm hoping with all of those bases covered, we should be able to have a nice selection of wall sections. I found a piece of off-cut foam board and another small piece of cardboard, and I just hot glued that together just to make sure that this foam didn't melt, because I didn't want that to happen halfway through, and it looks fine. That's okay. So I highly recommend that you do test materials before you start attacking them with hot glue. So, thought on camera I will make one of the long straight sections. So basically I'm going to put my wall along the centre of the base. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is measure that line, and that's where the glue will go. So just put a mark there. And one there. Right. Okay. And with my foam board, first thing I wanted to look at was what height I wanted the wall to be. Now, this figure is smaller than a lot of those really bulky modern so-called 28mm figures. Let's have a go. From his foot to his eye, that's 28mm. So that is 28mm, but that's considerably smaller than a Games Workshop figure, which I think some of those are pushing 40mm now. But anyway, we're going to go with this. And I was wondering whether 2 inches or 3 inches would be a good height. I'm going to try 3 inches. See what it looks like. I've marked that for 3 inches there. Again, a slow, not that firm cut. And then again, if you have a steel ruler, this job is much easier. But my steel ruler is very small and wouldn't be any good for this. going to glue that there. So if I get that figure, it's pretty high. If your movement rate is 6 inches and it's 3 inches up and 3 inches down, that's going to take your entire movement. I figured that would be quite useful. I'm not going to leave the top flat. I'm just going to shave at a 45-degree angle and a regular cut here. This is a ruined city, so I want this to look like it's, well, quite literally gone through the wars. What I might do as well is put some bullet holes in. I think I'm only going to do 2 wall sections that look like this. I'll do one halved section that can be put together to allow, you know, a gap in the wall, and then a corner section as well. You just want irregular cuts at slightly different angles, just to break it up. Like that. And now, you put some bullet holes in. I might get my Stanley knife for that. Push it in and spin it, and just lower the knife as you go around. There we go. Not do too many. When that's painted, it looks quite effective. You can go to town with all sorts of violence, but we'll leave that for now. Where's my cap? There it is. Right, so we've drawn the line there. That's where we'll put the glue. Hope that it doesn't melt again. Just check that it's straight. You don't have an awful lot of time before this dries completely, so you'll be quick. That looks alright. Yeah. So that is pretty high. Now I'm going to cover the base of this cardboard, as usual, with some filler. Ooh, bonus, look at this. You get a little tool which is quite useful, I suppose, but it's stuck. But we're going to use just an artist's palette knife. Just for a bit more control. You can also use these. I don't want to put an awful lot of this on today. It's just to get a little bit of texture on the base, really. That will also cut down on the drying time. While this is wet, there's nothing to stop you kind of putting rocks or if you've got any leftover pieces of kits, like if you've got a tank kit or if you've bought some buildings or whatever and you've got some leftover pieces, there's nothing to stop you sticking those into this filler while it dries, and that would look quite good. But we're going to keep this as cheap as possible. This is going to take a couple of hours to dry. I might put it in the garden because it's a bright windy day today. That's going to speed up the drying time. When this is dry, I'm going to paint the whole thing with dark grey. I'll do that off camera because I'm just going to paint it dark grey. Just with some cheap acrylic children's paint. And I'll come back when that stage is done. Right, the filler didn't take so long to dry today, it's quite warm outside. So I give it a couple of hours anyway to dry off. Then I painted the whole thing with dark grey, as you can see. I actually did 2 coats, especially on the outside of the foam board. The paint doesn't take very well, it's very cheap paint. So I just let 1 coat dry and then did another one. And all I'm going to do now is do a quick dry brush on the base with a light grey. I don't really want to put too much black in here. I usually end up putting too much in and you've got to do 3 or 4 different dry brushes. If I do a very light grey, I might be able to get away with just the one. And when I say dry brush, it's not really a dry brush, it's like an overbrush. So I just take some of the paint off. And just run the brush over the surface of the filler. If you don't take off a lot of the paint, you get a very streaky result. This isn't a fantastic result really, but it's very quick, and it's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Feel free to do multiple proper dry brushes if you want a more subtle effect, but I think this looks fine. When it comes to painting the wall, any sort of flat surfaces, I use a crisscross motion like that to try and minimise streaks. And hopefully you can see the bullet holes have a very dark grey in the recesses. So there's a bit of a highlight around the outside of those. Another tip, if you are doing an overbrush like this, use short, fast brush strokes, and again that should help avoid streaking. I actually painted the majority of this outside in the garden this afternoon, and that's quite a good idea anyway if you're able to go outside or at least sit by very near a window. It really lets you see where you've missed. Any mistakes show up. I'll just put a bit of lighter grey over here now. That's it. Looks alright. Managed to catch the wall there. So if I take off as much paint as I can, we'll just do some crisscross shapes. That should blend in a bit. This is a ruined city. I'm not particularly bothered about things like that. That looks alright. While that was drying, I decided to make a few more sections. So we've got this 12, well nearly 12 inch straight section. I made another one of those. I made a section with a piece cut out of it that allows movement, like unhindered movement, or you might say that this could be difficult terrain, but it also allows some line of sight, which is useful in games. I've done one half-length section, a half-length section which is cut away like this, so when they link up, you know, it doesn't have to extend the full length of the table. And finally, I've done a corner section. Just remember that when you're cutting the walls, this side, which is going to butt up against this side, needs to be slightly longer than this wall, just so that you get a nice angle there. Yeah, I'm quite happy with those. I've done so I made 6 pieces. That's more than enough for a 3 by 4 foot table. I probably wouldn't recommend using all of that on that table at once. It'd probably be useful to use it to fill in a corner, but you know, you can play around with things. Thank you very much for watching, as usual, and please like and comment and subscribe if you're able to. And I'll see you next time when, hopefully, I'll put the entire board together and we'll see how much scenery we've got to cover a 3 foot by 4 foot table.